new IP. It's one of the riskiest and hardest things to do in gaming. But despite the odds, Elden Ring has taken the world by storm. In a gaming landscape where Ubisoft open worlds were filled with pointless map markers and unending hand-holding, Elden Ring provided real exploration. In a world where Horizon, Far Cry, and Red Dead fed us a story bit by bit, piece by piece, Elden Ring provided one we discovered for ourselves. And it's because of these very things that the game has become a massive success, selling the likes of a blockbuster like Call of Duty. For so many reasons, this game is absolutely amazing. In fact, I already made a video about it. But there is one thing, one big question I keep asking myself. Is this game too long? Because for all the memorizing and amazing moments I've had, the jaw-dropping scenes, well-designed bosses, and an unending world, I can't help but shake the feeling that Elden Ring's size, scale, and never-ending map may actually have some unintended consequences. I want to start by first shining a light on the reasons this game's enormous scope is actually a good thing. Because Elden Ring is not just big in terms of size, but in terms of depth as well. As wide as an ocean, and as deep as one too. You see, every single area in this game is filled to the brim with interesting bosses, NPC encounters, ghost stories, and world building. Every location has caves, hidden trapdoors, giant megastructures from the world's past, and deserted towns full of mystery. This means no matter where you go, there is always something grabbing your attention. Many games try to follow this 30-second rule of giving you something new and interesting all the time, and Elden Ring certainly achieves this. And it only becomes more impressive when you realize just how massive this world really is. Some of the greatest moments in Elden Ring are when you think you've almost gotten to the end, only to discover that an entire new zone, bigger than the one before it, lies before you. That constant feeling of asking yourself, is this game really this massive? Could they actually put this much content in a game, especially nowadays, where releases feel so bare bones? A sense that you are playing a game that is more than just small main quests, but rather a grand and epic odyssey of proportions we rarely see, and more importantly, feel. But this grand adventure can't be reached without some trade-offs. You see, with a world this big and so full of content, the fatigue can start to set in. Where the first 30 hours of exploration feel magical, that magic can start to fade with time. When finding amazing new areas and secrets becomes the norm, the initial impact of those moments begins to lose its luster. Especially because Elden Ring is a hard game. You can't simply sit back and take in the story. You need to fight constantly and focus to win each and every battle, always at the risk of losing every single rune you have. This fun and exciting journey never loses what makes it great, but it does start to develop problems of fatigue with time. Focusing on a story, combat, and any other world for this long requires meaningful attention. And in the modern world of smartphones and social media, that is a very hard currency to maintain. And this is only exacerbated by what I call the boss problem. You see, Elden Ring touts over 80 bosses throughout its world, many more than that in fact. And that's an impressive feat at first glance, but one you realize has cut some corners at closer inspection. The more and more you play Elden Ring, the more you realize those countless number of bosses you have fought have a lot of repeats. A lot of dragons with similar looks, spells, and moves. The same bosses over and over again, but this time in a group of two. And the more you play, the more you realize how FromSoft was even able to make a game so damn big. Art assets are reused in many places. Entire bosses and encounters happen over and over again. Luckily for Elden Ring, the combat is so good and the variation in builds so diverse, you can make it unique by just playing over and over again against the same bosses. But the real problem lies in the pacing, because pacing is one of the most important parts of any moving art. It's the key to making a memorable movie, game, or YouTube video you watch the entire way through. And because Elden Ring is so long, it becomes exponentially harder to stick the landing here. Because the longer and longer the game goes on, the more the player yearns to have answers, to see the end of the story, to meet the important characters, and to fight and defeat the big bad bosses. And in the second half of Elden Ring, I began to notice I started to have an itch to start making more progress. Where before finding a new part of the map excited me, now part of me was filled with dread, with how much more content I had to go every time I unlocked a new part of the map. I never stopped loving the moment-to-moment gameplay, but my monkey brain needed closure. I had been playing for over 60 hours now, and I saw no end in sight. The game was just as fun as it was before, but my intrinsic human need to feel accomplishment started to take over. I needed to beat this game, to talk with others about the ending, and to feel like I was done. Funnily enough, too, the later half of this game actually gets even better. More unique bosses, environments, caves, and storytelling. The second half of this game makes Limgrave look infinitely less interesting in retrospect. But the problem was, by the time I finally got there, the pacing had already begun to crumble. My new armor and sword were so powerful and upgraded that I started to beat every main boss and side boss on my first try. In a game so large, it's impossible to account for all builds and things a player could do, and thus the pacing of the final battles was ruined. I began to get through everything in the game quite easily. And beyond that, I still had a yearning to get to the end, and to start more quickly killing bosses over and over, to stop doing every little thing I saw like I was in the beginning. And it made me start to wonder, for as great as Elden Ring is, and as great and as amazing and extremely long open worlds like Skyrim and Breath of the Wild are, would these games be just a little bit better if they were shorter? If Elden Ring's runtime was cut down by, say, 20 to 30 hours, and instead of reusing bosses and some assets across the entire journey, what if instead we focused on making a smaller but more refined world? One with all the quirks and amazing qualities that the current Elden Ring world has, but with less reuse of everything, more unique moments, and thus making every single moment count. But it's not that easy of an answer, because at the end of the day, the best game possible would be hundreds of hours long. And for its entire runtime, we would never see a reused boss. Every new environment would have all new assets and storytelling, and the pacing would always remain compelling. But making art, and especially video games, doesn't work like that. There are so many more hours to work in a day, and so many bodies you can throw at a project, but that won't give you a final great piece of art. And even given an unlimited amount of time, technology would simply advance so quickly over a large number of years that the team would accumulate too much technical debt and struggle under the pressure. Look at Star Citizen to see that. So as to whether or not Elden Ring is too long, I would say it probably is. Because for all the great things it does do, the amazing journey it provides, the pacing does suffer, and the game suffers for it. But I would be lying if I said that the extreme length didn't also make me fall in love with it. You see, most of the games that are my all-time favorites are extremely long, and there's a good reason for that. It allows you time to become immersed in the world, its characters, its combat, and its story. Spending hundreds of hours on anything will make you more attached than if you simply spent a handful. For many of you, you may have wished the game was longer because you didn't get enough. For many, you may have wished it was shorter because you didn't have the time. But at the end of the day, what Elden Ring teaches us is that your game should be as long as it needs to be. Whatever allows you to reuse the least amount of assets and content and provide the best pacing throughout should be paramount. This debate in this entire video is premised on a farce. It's not about how long your game is. It's about how long you can keep your players' attention.